Hi, I'm Ankhra, and I am the founder and president of PS314. We are a matchmaking agency for social change, and this summer of 2020, we've decided to dedicate our time to some online video programming focused specifically around identity. So we've asked various individuals to join us at different times throughout the summer just to talk a little bit about their lived experience so we can get a better understanding of our very diverse, multicultural, multi-dynamic world where we all live within intersections. And the goal of these conversations is really just to share perspectives. Quite frankly, we find that oftentimes we are living and breathing and working in silos and often talking to echo chambers. And so if we're able to open up our minds a bit and listen to other people's experiences, it would also benefit us a great deal. So with that said, I will happily bring in Stephanie Hughley, who is joining us for our conversation on intergenerational leadership and wisdom as we search for liberation. Hi, Steph.
Hi, Pi. How are
How
you?
are you? I'm great. I'm great. So Stephanie, I wanted to just kind of bring you in a little bit because you are our elder of the chat for today. And I just want to honor your experience as it relates to leadership and wisdom and learn a little bit about your journey so far. And then I'll bring in the rest of the community to have a dialogue. But can you just maybe just introduce yourself and share how you define leadership and when you believe you first took on a leadership role?
Well, my name is Stephanie Hughley, and I believe that leadership is really servanthood. I think that everyone was born to be a leader, although for many of us it was suppressed by our society, by our parents, by whoever. And so I feel like my entire life has been about helping people and helping people define and discover themselves so that in fact they could understand the gifts and the talents that they have that will allow them to step into these leadership positions. And so I probably have been a leader most of my life. My siblings would probably say I've been bossy, you know. However, I would define that as leadership because they always seem to follow me. As I got into my career, I stepped into this as an artist, as a performing artist, and moved over into management and producing. And I've never been afraid, as they say, to make it up. And so people want people who will make a decision and then take responsibility for that. And so I felt like that was what I could do. I think that one of my gifts is not being afraid to make it up and then being responsible for whatever decision I decide, whatever decision I make. And so throughout my career, and I'd say all the way to the very last thing I did, which was the vice president at BAM over all of the education, I was always able to create these platforms where I could be creative and innovative and figure out a new way to do something or a different way to do something. Maybe nothing is new under the sun, they say. But certainly something different, something that I thought would help people. And I think as a Black woman in a white male dominated society, um, we are always faced with challenges. But if we know who we are and we're confident about that, then I believe that you make place for yourself. Or else, if that place doesn't accept you as you are, then you go and make another place and space. But I think leadership is all about having a vision. So I think that every place I've ever been, I've always had a vision for what it could be to make life better, especially for Black people.
Mm. You know what's so interesting? I've been talking to so many individuals, different generations, but certainly within the baby boomer generation. And the statement has been it's time for the new generation, for the younger generation to take the lead. It's time for us to pass the torch. Is that your feeling? Do you feel like there's a role you can play now? And if so, what would you say that is?
Well, I think that a leader has a responsibility to empower the next generation. And I feel that we've done a great job. I mean, look at you, Pi. Look at PS 314. I mean, there's so many young people that I'm seeing step to the plate, and I'm like, yay, team, go for it, you know? I feel like our role as in the boomer generation is to really kind of release it and let you do it. But to be here on the sidelines, not just to cheer you on, but to offer advice when asked, participate when invited, because I do feel like we have done a lot. We stood on some very strong shoulders, the generations before us. I'm only really 4 generations removed from enslavement, and so as I look at these next 2 generations coming behind me now, I'm inspired. I'm impressed. I'm like, go team.
That was my question. What's your hope for the next generation? And just in terms of advice. So this is my ask, and I have so many throughout the time that we're together this afternoon. What do you feel we need to be mindful of? What lessons need to be learned from the past and your journey so far that we should be thinking about as we navigate forward? I've been reading Begin Again by Eddie Glaude Jr. And I pulled out this one quote from the very beginning in the introduction. Not everything is lost. Responsibility cannot be lost. It can only be abdicated. And if one refuses abdication, one begins again. And begins again just continues to come up for me because it feels like we're here again, even though it's a different time. So just from your vantage point, looking at the past 4 generations from slavery, looking at the future and where we are today, what's worked? What should we think about for just tools and techniques to move ourselves towards liberation?
Well, I don't think anything is ever lost. I think each generation gets to kind of pick up where the last generation left off. And I think that it's understanding the responsibilities. When we were talking earlier about passing the torch, I feel that that's what a leader is called to do, to build new leaders. Leaders are instilling in the young people coming behind them the values, the morals, the reason for being, to build on what each generation before us has built. So as I think every generation is kind of spiraling upward.
Mm.
Like we've been here before, but we haven't been here before. Because when I look on my television set and I see all these young people, particularly all the young white people, but maybe they're not even white. We're getting into this society where it's just all these different colors of people who are saying this is wrong. And if part of the vision is to fight injustice and inequality wherever you see it, if that's your life goal, if you're committed to that purpose, then I believe that all the people who are committed to that purpose will be there. And what I see are these numbers multiplying. And so I'm very hopeful for this generation. I feel like we're in a season where all of the things that were lying under the surface have been able to be uncovered. It was always there, but we have a tendency to somehow feel that it's over, or that we've arrived, or that because we're better than we were, that it's all okay, but it's not. Until it's better for everyone, then the task is still in front of us. The struggle continues. Although I feel like the more young people can understand their gifts and their talents and get a vision, be committed, bring the passion to the purpose, I think we keep moving forward, upward and onward.
Thanks, Steph. I'd love to just invite a few other members of our collective, and you're just so generous with your time as an advisor to the company, and just giving so much of your wisdom and expertise. I'm going to invite Michon Lartigue to join us, who's a senior consultant with the firm, and she's based in Washington, D.C., and she is part of the Gen X generation. Alisa Norris, who's our marketing manager, and she is a part of the millennial generation. And Elise Simon, who is a part of the Gen Z generation, who has joined us this summer as a fellow and production assistant for the Fireside Chat Series. Welcome, ladies.
Hi.
So I have a question for each of you. Do you define yourself as a leader? And do you feel that you have been successful in that role? And if so, how?
I do define myself as a leader. It took me many years to walk into that space confidently. And I still have my moments, but absolutely. And it really resonated with me what you shared, Stephanie. When I thought about it and I heard you talking about like your siblings and your family, I was like, oh, right, I was leading my brother like way back in the day. So when I think about that, I've been a leader for a long time, but I do define myself as a leader. And for me, it's about leadership is really being about an ability to mobilize people through, various circumstances, good, bad, or ugly. And I think, for myself, it took a while. I was always a part of a lot of things. People invested in me as a leader. It took a while for me to hold that fully and step into this space with a place of confidence, I would say.
Alisa?
I would say for me, early in my career, professionally, people saw it in me more than I saw it in myself. So it'd be like, I would think of it as, oh, well, they're telling me that I should do this and they're recommending me for these things. I guess, right? Fast forward as I've been able to, in preparation of having a talk with you all, I've had a chance to really look into self and think about instances where I actually did show up as one. I would consider myself as a leader, but I would consider myself as more or less a micro leader. My growing up was from, I don't know what generation my grandmother was, but she was born in 1930. So her upbringing for me, it was a certain kind of leadership. So I always thought of it in that way, as a matriarch, as someone with loads of respect that you give them, and then they give you permission to have the space to be present in.
Elise, do you define yourself as a leader? And if so, how?
Well, I think these days, virtually anyone with a social media account can be a leader, even if their ideas don't necessarily attract followers, they still have the agency to put their thoughts out there. So it's very much up to the individual themselves. I personally don't use social media that much, at least not for those purposes. I'm a journalism student, though, in college. And so by writing and producing stories, I'm a behind the scenes leader. So I help to shape discussions and socially important topics for people to discuss later on.
It's interesting to hear you all, because you've added on additional titles to the word leader to help define yourselves. Is that to provide you with your own permission to sit in that space? I'm just curious. Alisa, you said you're a micro leader.
I'm still adjusting, right? So it's me, yes, giving myself permission, but still processing the ownership of that, but still leaning into it.
Stephanie, do you feel that being a Black woman creates some of these impediments to owning our own agency in the world of leadership? Just thinking about just this discussion specifically, adding on an additional word next to leader so that we feel comfortable owning it, or leading from behind as opposed to just simply taking the seat.
I think it doesn't matter where you're leading as long as you know that you're a leader. Yes, no question, being Black and being a woman in a white male-dominated society is always going to present challenges. The beauty is being able to inspire the next generation of young Black female leaders. Because what matters is that you know who you are, and you know why you're there, and you know what your purpose is. And then your passion will drive your purpose. And that's leadership to me.
Michon, you speak a lot about trusting the flow, and I really want to get into a conversation about a connection between faith and fear. And it's a question for all of you, but Michon, I'd love for you to kick it off. What does trust the flow mean, and why is it so important to have faith over fear for you and your experience?
Faith and fear are actually like an intricate they're together. A lot of times in my life, particularly when I've been in leadership positions, I've been nervous, I've been afraid, and I keep going because that faith space is sort of grounded in no matter what, good, bad, or ugly, I can make it. I can support others. I can help others make it. I can move with a space of knowing that it is going to be okay and I'm going to be okay. I say trust the flow because it's a reminder for myself and for others to remember that we're part of a bigger sort of piece and ecosystem and that we're connected in that. And I think the faith and fear space, the faith space is where I ground myself.
I think that faith can be somewhat difficult to find if you don't feel ready to take on leadership roles. And maybe I feel that way because I'm younger and I haven't had enough opportunities of that nature yet. But I definitely can echo what Michon was saying earlier about feeling fear or feeling intimidated to take on specific things and to take on new experiences. But with each role, such as this one, for example, I just sort of trust that it will come naturally over time.
Are there individuals who you see as activists online? Anyone in particular who's a role model for you?
I'd say a lot of my friends have that sort of social media activist trope about them. They were the ones who sort of convinced me to get out of my shell and to start writing stories about social groups or about politics and things like that, and really put my voice out there and not be afraid to speak out. So they are definitely role models to me.
And Alisa, do you have role models online or in person or both?
I would say more in person than online. And when you say leader, I guess for me, it's really tied to family. Majority of it, a nice portion of it is with my upbringing. My grandmother was a leader. She's the matriarch of her family, the oldest in her family. Now she's the oldest living in our family. My mom, who was the same, the oldest of all, matriarch of her family. And then my older sister, who is the oldest. So it's all like all of these alpha, carry everybody on their back. Let's all go. We're all going to get there kind of mentality that I grew up around. The figure it out mentality, the we're going to get it done regardless mentality, the it don't look like we're going to get through it, but we're actually going to get through it. Yeah. And you may not have known, I had no idea, but I'm going to move like everything's fine. And you don't need to know about what happened behind the scenes. We're going to be fine. So, yeah, I think leadership for me, from a family sense, definitely, and every day thereafter. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that it's a burden or a privilege to be a leader?
There's some moments where leadership can be a bit burdensome. What I'm doing impacts so many more, and that just adds an additional layer as opposed to moving about by your own volition. But in that same breath, you could be happy to deal with that for that short time, because more often than not, that burdensome feeling could be brief, and you could push yourself through the privilege of saying, I've gotten to this place, so that I'm going to keep charging forward or continuing to do what I'm doing.
Well, it's absolutely a privilege for me at this point. I'm sure that there were moments where it was burdensome. Mm-hmm. However, I say do it afraid. What happens when you do it afraid is that you become fearless in a way. You develop a confidence in your ability to do it. The confidence level grows. And you really do learn how to just do it afraid. I think that's faith, really. And what we want is the faith to believe that I can face this fear and I can get past this fear. And if it comes back, I'll face it again. If it comes back, I'll face it again and keep moving forward.
What have you found to be some of the stereotypes about millennials, Gen Z, Gen X that you can just blow out of the water, or maybe are affirmed for you that you feel like, that's a note for you guys to think about? Elevating for yourselves? What do you see?
There's this idea that somehow millennials and Gen Z really want boomers to get out of the way, that they don't really understand, and that they've been there too long and they don't listen. It has been my practice most of my adult life to always have 3 generations at the table, because I think that we're dealing with the past, the present, and the future always. I want to hear what they have to say. And I think that we are in an effort to build community, because that's really where we all are, collaboration and community. We owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our future to be able to listen, truly listen.
As of late, my interactions with other generations, there were roles that I took that were junior specific, and I was not really given a voice, right? In a space where everyone's like, just absorb, absorb, absorb. I'm not going to overstep. I'm just going to read the room and see how I'm received. So, like, I've had so many multi-layered and intertwined generational experiences myself where I can connect with older generations in a way. So I don't always put prejudice on them because I've always been around them. I have patience, but it's my personality.
In my experience, there's been definitely that stereotype of the baby boomer or just older generations being really rigid and stuck in their ways, sort of, but also as a resource for me to learn from as teachers, basically, in the workplace.
That's interesting because I'm listening to Alisa and Elise, and they talk about patience and observation and listening. And Stephanie, you say the same thing, listening and patience. And so I'm curious, Michon is kind of the bridge between. What have you seen that works? And what have you seen that has not worked?
Gen X was always in a space in working in workplaces with other generations of both trying to prove like that we are capable, smart, that we have what it takes to quote unquote succeed, while also at the same time battling a bit of confusion about who we were. I found myself as a mentor, sort of like I'm the mentor, and talking with younger generations where I'm like, oh, we're peers, right? We're peers working together. And then I found myself in reverence of my mentors who, are leaders and who have done incredible things in their own right. And so I would often find myself between the two, but I definitely remember feeling disturbed by the different generational kind of like the language I would hear one generation say about the other and vice versa. And I always kind of felt in the middle of that space, but I felt like, but why aren't we just listening to each other?
Well, that's powerful. I'm curious, Stephanie, if you could give advice to your 20-year-old self, what would it be?
Probably just to listen more, to absorb more, to read, research, study. I tell myself to pace myself and not feel like I had to get it all at one time, that it just didn't have to come all at once and I didn't have to move so fast. I would tell my 20-year-old self, slow down, you got time.
And Alisa and Elise, what do you feel will be your legacy? What do you think people will say about you at the end of your life?
I would be remembered for the impact from behind that I leave. I think that I'm wonderful at supporting others and uplifting others and amplifying other people's voices.
One thing that I've taken from older generations, like from my parents, because they are, I guess, the baby boomer generation, is diligence. Just with anything I do it as well as I can, do as good of a job as I can.
Thank you. And Michon, what have you learned so far along your journey?
I think when I think about that space of fear and faith, I think that's one part of what I want my legacy to be. I want people to be able to at least know that I pushed, through fear as much as I possibly could. I would love to create and be a part of, even if I'm not creating it, but being a part of a legacy for every generation that allows us to really, truly revel in our humanity. It's like, how dope would it be if we could all just, be very clear about where our humanity is in all of this, and really have a space of care for and with each other.
Thank you. It's been really interesting to listen to all of you because so much of the work as it relates to seeking our liberation individually, collectively, has so much to do with our mindset and perspective, how we see ourselves at the table, how we see each other. And so I thank you all so much for just offering your varied perspectives, but you're so much in alignment that, Stephanie, building the muscle and working towards I will and I can and I have done and therefore I am. Honoring those who have come before and those who are coming after, and also honoring ourselves all along the same playing field. I heard that very clearly, Alisa, from you, and your due diligence, Elise, just to kind of think about what you want to offer to the world and leaving it open. I hope that you also take a piece from Michon's learnings of self-care and how important it will be to take care of yourself and trust the flow and to have faith over fear throughout. Any last words, just thinking about the leadership that we have today? We've lost an amazing steward of leadership and the honor today with John Lewis. And so I'm just curious what's on your minds as it relates to the change that's coming, that we're all hoping for, what your hope is for our future. And I'll just offer that to anyone to answer.
I would encourage you to make sure that you create a network around yourself of those people who kind of can tell you the truth always about yourself. And what I'll say about John Lewis, he was certainly one of my heroes. I think he was a great leader, a great example of a leader. He was driven by his passion for justice and equality for everybody. And he was so respectful of people, of all people, and especially younger people. We stand on shoulders of giants, and they expect no less from us, that each of you would take your responsibility to move this agenda forward where everybody is created equal, they're treated equal, that you stand for what is just and fair and right, and you commit your life to it. You develop the passion for it to build community where everybody is equal.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Alisa. Thank you, Elise. And thank you, Michon. This is really beautiful. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you all.